me tell you a story. When I was a young buck about to enter my first year in law school, I went to the Supreme Court for the first and only time in my life. And Clarence Thomas, of all people, sat down with me and the group I was with. And at the time, I was like, you know what? I don't agree with a lot of what this guy has to say, but he sure is a nice guy. And one of the things I remember at the time was he was telling the story about he and his wife. He was like, I'm just a regular guy. And we just go around the country and we just like to mix it up with regular folk. And, you know, we have an RV and people don't know who I am. And so, you know, I get to basically go incognito and learn about the real America. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I have this Clarence Thomas guy all wrong. Turns out, no, I had him right.
You know what it is, Ravi? His search for the real America, it just expanded.
Yeah.
And he was so inquisitive and curious, he had to take it outside of America.
I know he's honestly, he's making me look like I'm, you know, like a displaced person or something. So the background here, I think everybody knows basically the contours of this right now, is that it's been revealed that for more than 2 decades, he's been accepting luxury trips virtually every year, from what we could tell, potentially even more than every year, from a Dallas businessman named Harlan Crow. Which I'm kind of jealous, Jason, that we didn't get to make up that name for our screenplay that we're writing. But this is a guy who makes $285,000 a year as a public servant. And as I've described, he's very fond of talking about how in touch he is with the American people, and he has his RV. Now, he didn't disclose these, which may be illegal. And certainly, Jason, right, is unethical. Can we all just agree on that?
Yeah, I mean, does anybody think that the reason he didn't disclose them is just, oh, whoops? Like, I mean, he didn't disclose them because he's like, can I figure out a way to not disclose this?
Right.
Which is what you do when you're like, I don't know if this is okay. And in fact, this is probably not okay. And so, yeah, that's what he's doing.
There is a law involved here, which is the 1978 Ethics in Government Act, which applies to justices apparently, where they must file a financial disclosure each year that lists gifts of more than $415 in advance of even an appearance of impropriety. Now, there's a whole separation of powers issue here, whether Congress really can legislate that. And unfortunately, if there were such a question about such a law, it would go right to the very people that we're trying to hold accountable, which is just a flaw in our democratic system, I would say, is that there's nobody to police these people. And, you know, what I find fascinating, we've talked about this on the podcast before when we talked about the Ginny Thomas revelations, is that lower court justices, state court justices, district court justices, magistrate judges around the country are all subject to way more stringent ethical standards than our Supreme Court. And as Chief Justice Roberts has said, basically, we're fine policing ourselves. I'm sorry, they're not fine policing themselves. They appear to be bought and sold.
Yeah, clearly. But they don't see it that way, right? Like I'm sure that Thomas is not the only one in the court who looks at what he's doing and goes like, well, you know, it was a friend of his. And that seems to be the defense that they're using. It's that, you know, you keep seeing people say, well, Supreme Court justices are allowed to have friends. And look, that is an absurd argument that this guy is just a friend, but it's like the Biz Marquee song keeps playing in my head. but like, I see how Clarence Thomas and Ginny Thomas think this guy is just a friend of mine, right? Because over 20 years of vacationing with someone, you probably become pretty close friends. But that completely loses perspective over what's happening here. And I've seen this play out, actually, like in a state legislature, for instance. So here's how the line between friend and benefactor gets blurred, and really gets blurred even to the point where you forget who your actual constituents are. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your wacky neighbor or some sketchy message board. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code MAJORITY to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code MAJORITY to save an additional 10% off your order today. So here's how I saw it play out, like when I was in state politics, which is, you know, at first you go down to a place like Jefferson City, or in this case, you get to the Supreme Court, and you're thinking about the people who you're supposed to be either representing or working on behalf of. In the case of the Supreme Court, you know, ideally that's who you're thinking about. And then what happens is your constituents tend to be the people who you spend the most time around, whether purposefully or not. So in Jefferson City, what I saw when there were at that time no limits on the gifts that lobbyists could give, and I was the stick in the mud who wouldn't take gifts from lobbyists and everybody found it annoying, I would watch as people I was friends with, Democrats and Republicans, would never eat a meal that they paid for. Like if they were going out to a meal, they made sure a lobbyist was either present, or, no joke, I saw people call lobbyists and ask them to put meals on their credit card so that they wouldn't have to pay for it, right? And I mean, so then what happens is, after a while, if you're in a safe district, or in this case, a seat where you have a lifetime appointment, you don't have to go back and actually be with the people who you represent. Instead, what you do is you spend most of your leisure time, or your, you know, not on the floor work time, around people who have an agenda. And that's what happened here. Harlan Crow is like one of the architects of the idea of putting conservatives on the court, of conservative judicial philosophy through the Federalist Society. He has at these gatherings all these other mega donors who all have business in front of the court, whether their name is on the pleading or not. Obviously, the decisions that are made by the Supreme Court greatly impact their own businesses. And these people, they get access to Clarence Thomas. They don't even have to talk about the cases. What happens is that at some point you look at decisions and you don't see just the points of law. You see the players involved. You see the friends, and you're pitting friends against each other. I saw this in the State House. I saw where there'd be like a vote where, you know, you're doing a lot of votes at once, and somebody would run in and they'd be running to their seat, and they'd only have like 30 seconds to push red or green. And they'd say, "What is this vote?" And I'm not kidding you, Ravi. Instead of saying like, "Oh, it's between pharma and, you know, Medicaid purchasers," they would say Bob and James. Like they would name two lobbyists, and they would say like who was on the opposite side, right? And then I would watch legislators vote based on which of those two people were their friend. And so that's how this works, is that they don't realize that those people have a job to do, and that job is to become their friend. I don't fault the lobbyists in this. They're just doing their job. In fact, the lobbyists in these cases would usually prefer to not have to take these people that they don't really like out to dinner all the time. Now, maybe Harlan Crow genuinely likes Clarence Thomas, but it just happens to be the case that Harlan Crow and all of the other people who go on these weird retreats all benefit greatly from Clarence Thomas feeling like they're friends. And really, after a while, they're just his constituents. That's who his constituents are.
Friends with benefits. Great movie,
with
by the way.
Major benefits, yeah.
I think that
benefits.
might be our episode title.